Greetings, YouTube. I found myself thinking about averages recently. How a curve of 3 to 18 gives you a probability, classic bell curve, is really useful for skills. I've talked about that in this channel. And it really does reflect the real world. Because if you do a skill, and I'm sure all of us are good at something, even if you get better at it over time, you usually perform average. That's just what you do. Sometimes you really blow it, and sometimes you get something that just is, chef's kiss perfect. But you normally get that average result. That is just reality. But of course, if you're using a D20, you don't get that result. It's random. You have a 5% chance of hitting any kind of result. And that is not really a reflection of reality. And again, I've talked about this before. I think all of us have. And it got me thinking about damage in combat. Because no matter how good you are, no matter how successful you were with that roll, almost always, once you've achieved your goal, you're going to take a die and you're going to roll the average. I got a 3, okay? You're just going to roll the die. It doesn't matter as long as you didn't get a critical. If you get an 18 on your average combat roll, which is almost always a hit, you're going to roll that die and you're going to get a 3 sometimes, or get a 1 sometimes. And if you're high level, you may have exceeded the requirements of that, hit by a lot. But you're still going to have to roll those dice. So no matter how successful you were in that combat situation, you didn't get anything for it. You just get to roll the die. And to me, that seems very anticlimactic. How many times have we been in an intense combat situation where it's, everything's in line, you land a hit, it's not a critical, but you do get a solid hit, and you roll that die, and you roll a 2. That doesn't feed into that dynamic, cinematic kind of vibe, now does it? It feels like a real letdown. But let's say that we use the 3 die 6 process. Again, average, most of the time you're going to hit, or get a good chance of hitting, particularly if you're high level, but you're going to screw up sometimes, you're going to get a really successful sometimes. But what if we do that, but for every point above what you needed, that figures out the damage. The damage is based on that. Now, I think you'd have to have a static weapon damage. So like light weapons are 1, martial weapons are 2 points of damage, and exotic weapons are 3. And you would then have the weapons different from each other based on their traits rather than their damage output. You could say that maybe, one-handed exotics are 3 points and two-handed martial are 3 points if you want to get there. Okay, so your heavy-duty hitting things are still hitting 3 times as hard as your light one-handed weapon. And if you want to throw weapon speed in there, you're good. It affects your where your initiative lands. I mean, there's an argument for that. We've probably had that argument here on my channel before. But then for every point you get above, that damage goes up. Maybe it goes up per unit. So if you have 1 light damage, it goes 1 point. If you get 2 points of damage, it goes 2 points for every point above. You can figure out how you want to do it. But how successful you are is reflected in that roll. Not to mention, you're saving a roll. You're only having to roll once. It is both giving you your success rate and your damage output. This is not a radical idea. I believe the 2D12 system from Thousand Suns does the same thing. So I'm not breaking any new ground here. It's just that your success is reflected in how good you accomplished in that particular instance. So the cinematic scene, you're rolling a really good number. It exceeded the requirement, hit that guy by 12 points. you just did a heck of a lot of damage to this guy. A stupendous amount of damage to this guy. That reflects the cinematic moment. You succeeded, you did a lot of damage. As opposed to, you succeeded at hitting them, and you get a 2. And that's just disappointing. Now I realize that's a fairly radical change for your classic D&D game. You're essentially completely abandoning the whole concept of the D20, which is at the heart of the D&D system. You're going to a different uh, type of roll, which is 3d6, so you get that nice bell curve. But I like the idea of streamlining it. Then I realized as I thought about this, aren't I just playing a system that now uses nothing but a skill base? Haven't I just changed everything into a skill? And isn't that like a lot of other systems? Don't a lot of doesn't like harp do the same thing? That everything is a skill and it's percentiles, but doesn't that's did I just reinvent the wheel? So it was a thought experiment, and I'm like, I don't know if I really want to go to the effort of implementing this kind of idea, writing it down and hammering all the details out, because maybe somebody else has already done it. Um, Now I do love the D20, don't get me wrong, it's got a sweet spot in my heart. But the idea that you're rolling the same percentage for every single thing really is bugging me. You get a 5% chance of everything. And to me, that just doesn't reflect reality. That's not how skills work. That's not how combat works. Most of the time, you get a very average result. Sometimes your gun jams. Sometimes you get a shot right in the guy's eye. It's frustrating. Again, you did so well. You roll a 2. So have you ever implemented something like this so that the success rate on that die not only streamlines the process, but reflects the damage that your character has done? So that if they do really well, they do nothing. And if they do really great, they do a lot of damage. I'd like to see out there who has implemented such a system. And if you have a favorite rule system that kind of does this, I'd like to know about it. Other than like the 2D12, which I already mentioned in Thousand Suns. I know about that system. But yeah, if you have any house rules things you've done, or any published stuff, or even this like really good fan created stuff, because there's a lot of good fan created stuff out there. Have you implemented that for your classic high fantasy game? And if you have, what's it look like?